The voting chamber fell silent as the last holographic display flickered to life. Ambassador Yairo watched the numbers climb higher and higher. 847 species had cast their votes. Only 3 had voted against the measure. His chest swelled with satisfaction as he turned to face the human representative. Helen Graves sat alone at the Earth delegation table. Her gray hair was pulled back simply. Her hands rested flat on the smooth surface before her. She did not look surprised. She did not look angry. She simply waited. "The vote is final," Yair announced to the assembled chamber. "Humanity's seat on the Galactic Council is hereby revoked. All human presence in Council space must cease within 90 standard days." The chamber erupted in cheers. Species from 1,000 worlds celebrated what they called their Independence Day. For 200 years, humans had been everywhere. In their hospitals, on their stations, teaching their children, fighting their wars, building their cities, always there, always interfering, always showing them new ways to do things. Now it would end. Helen stood slowly. She gathered her data tablet and tucked it under her arm. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the noise. "We accept the Council's decision." The cheering died down. Species looked at each other with confusion. They had expected protests, threats, anger. Humans were emotional creatures. Everyone knew that. "Earth will honor this vote completely," Helen continued. "All human personnel will withdraw from every Council facility, station, research center, hospital, military outpost, and colony within the required timeframe. We will terminate every treaty, every trade agreement, every mutual defense pact. You have voted for a galaxy without human involvement. You will have exactly that." Yairo felt a strange chill run down his spine. Something in her tone unsettled him, but he pushed the feeling aside. This was victory. "Furthermore," Helen said, "we will remove all human technology currently on loan or lease to Council species. Our medical equipment, our navigation systems, our communications networks, all of it. You wanted independence. You shall have it in full." A murmur ran through the chamber. Several species shifted uncomfortably. "That seems extreme," a Centauran delegate called out. "Surely some arrangements can be made for essential systems." Helen turned to look at the speaker. "You voted to remove us from your society. We are simply complying. Or did you wish us to remain partially involved? That would defeat the purpose, would it not?" The Centauran delegate said nothing more. Helen gathered her belongings. "Earth wishes you all the best in your future endeavors. Goodbye." She walked out of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. No dramatic exit, no slamming doors. She simply left. Within hours, the message went out across every human facility in Council space. "Pack up. Come home. Bring everything." The Mercy of Stars, a massive hospital station orbiting the Centauran homeworld, received the message during a busy shift. Human doctors stopped mid-procedure. They called in their Centauran colleagues to take over. Some of the alien doctors protested. "We are in the middle of treating patients," Dr. Valen said to the human chief surgeon. "You cannot simply leave." "We can and we are," the human replied. She stripped off her surgical gloves. "Your government voted to remove us. We are complying. These patients are now your responsibility. But we do not know how to operate your equipment. You should have considered that before voting us out." The human medical staff departed that same day. They took their advanced scanners, their gene therapy machines, their surgical robots, everything marked with human patents or human designs. The Centaurans watched in growing horror as their hospital capabilities dropped by half in a single afternoon. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the stellar refineries that processed fuel for shipping lanes, human engineers packed their tools. The alien workers who had watched them maintain the complex fusion systems suddenly realized they had never been taught how to do it themselves. They had simply relied on human expertise. "Show us how it works before you go," a silicate foreman begged. "We offered to train you for decades," a human engineer replied. "Your governments always said you would learn eventually. Well, now you will have to." At border stations between hostile species, human peacekeepers loaded their ships. The local populations panicked. Without human mediation, old conflicts would reignite. Without human military presence, nothing would stop the raiders and pirates. "You cannot abandon us to the Kryn," a station commander pleaded. "We are not abandoning you," the human colonel said calmly. "Your government asked us to leave. We are leaving. What happens next is not our responsibility." In the prestigious Academy of Galactic Sciences, human professors finished their lectures early. Alien students protested. Their research projects depended on human guidance. Their theses were only half complete. "This is not fair to the students," an elderly Torven scholar said to his human colleague. "I agree," the human replied. "But fairness is not the issue. Your governments have spoken. We must respect their decision." The evacuation proceeded with cold efficiency. Humans did not argue, did not complain, did not try to negotiate exceptions. They simply packed their belongings and left. Earth orbit filled with returning ships, transports, medical vessels, military cruisers, research ships, construction barges, hundreds of thousands of human citizens coming home from posts across the galaxy. Helen Graves stood in the operations center on Earth watching the fleet arrive. Her senior staff gathered around her. "Some species are already requesting exceptions," her chief of staff reported. "They want us to leave medical personnel, or keep the navigation networks running, or at least train replacements before we go." "Denied," Helen said flatly. "All of it. They voted for complete separation. They get complete separation." "People will die," another aide said quietly. "When their systems fail, when their hospitals cannot cope, when their stations go dark." Helen turned to face her team. Her expression was hard, but her eyes held deep sadness. "Yes, people will die, and that blood is on the hands of every delegate who voted us out. We offered partnership. We offered friendship. We worked beside them for 2 centuries, and they repaid us with expulsion. They will learn exactly what they have lost. Only then will they understand what they threw away." "How long do we stay isolated?" someone asked. Helen looked back at the screens showing the chaotic galaxy beyond Earth's borders. Already the news networks reported problems, minor issues, small failures, the beginning of something much worse. "Until they beg us to return," she said. "Until every species that voted against us admits they were wrong. Until they understand that strength comes from unity, not division. However long that takes." The last human ship crossed into Earth's solar system 3 days before the deadline. The quarantine began immediately. No human vessel would enter Council space. No human would answer calls for help. No human technology would be shared. The galaxy had voted for independence. Now it would learn the true cost of that choice. The plague started in the lower hives of Tesseran. Worker drones began collapsing during their shifts. At first, the hive queens thought it was simple exhaustion, overwork, nothing serious. But within 3 days, 40,000 workers lay dead in the tunnels. The Centauran doctors arrived with their medical equipment. They set up quarantine zones. They analyzed the pathogen. They prepared treatment protocols. Everything they had learned from human teachers told them this was containable. But when they tried to activate the broad-spectrum antiviral dispensers, nothing happened. The machines sat silent. Dr. Valen stared at the control panel in confusion. He pressed the activation sequence again. Still nothing. "Get a human technician," he ordered. His assistant looked at him with wide eyes. "Doctor, there are no human technicians. They all left 2 weeks ago." The reality hit Valen like a physical blow. These machines required human maintenance codes, human diagnostic software, human repair protocols. Without humans, they were just expensive boxes. "Use manual methods," he said desperately. "We can synthesize the antivirals ourselves." They tried. They worked around the clock, but the human-designed systems had been integrated into everything. The synthesis chambers needed human-programmed parameters. The delivery systems required human-calibrated dosing. Every piece of equipment assumed human oversight. The death toll reached 100,000 by the end of the first week. Halfway across the galaxy, navigation beacon 447 simply stopped transmitting. Ships traveling through the sector suddenly found themselves without guidance. The faster-than-light corridors that made galactic travel possible required precise beacon signals. Without them, ships were flying blind through dimensional space. The freighter Distant Hope emerged from FTL right into the path of a passenger liner. Both ships tried to maneuver, but in dimensional space, normal physics did not apply fully. They collided at the barrier between realities. Both ships tore apart. 1,500 souls died instantly. Investigation teams rushed to check other beacons. They found the same problem spreading across the network. One by one, beacons were failing. All of them had been maintained by human technicians who understood the delicate quantum mechanics involved. "Can we repair them?" the Beacon Authority Director asked his chief engineer. The engineer looked at the diagnostic readout. "Director, I do not even understand what half of these components do. The humans never explained the deeper systems. They just kept them running." "Figure it out." "It could take years, decades. These are quantum-entangled networks spanning the entire galaxy. The mathematics alone." The director closed his eyes. "How many ships are currently in transit?" "Millions." "How many will die if we cannot restore the beacons?" The engineer did not answer. He did not need to. On the trading floors of the Galactic Exchange, algorithms began behaving erratically. Market values swung wildly. Currency rates fluctuated without reason. Within hours, 3 major banking systems reported critical errors. The financial analysts pulled up the system architecture. Their blood ran cold. The stability programs that prevented market crashes had been designed by human economists. The predictive models that smoothed out volatility were human-made. Even the basic transaction verification systems had human code at their core. "We need to shut down trading," someone suggested. "If we shut down, the panic will be worse," another analyst replied. "Species will think we are collapsing." "We are collapsing." The Ferengi Commerce Guild declared bankruptcy on day 19 after the human departure. They had built their entire operation on human financial infrastructure. Without it, they had nothing. The shockwave rippled through the galactic economy. If the Ferengi could fall, anyone could fall. Outer sector trade routes began reverting to barter. Advanced civilizations reduced to haggling over goods like primitive merchants. It was humiliating. It was necessary. In the border regions between the Voskan clans and the Meridian Alliance, old tensions erupted into violence. A trade dispute over mining rights turned into a shooting match. Within days, both sides mobilized their fleets. For 200 years, human peacekeepers had kept these species from each other's throats. They had mediated every dispute, stopped every escalation before it became war. Now there was no one to stop anything. The pirate rings of the Obsidian Nebula noticed the absence of human patrol ships immediately. They struck a convoy on day 12, then another, then 5 more. Civilian vessels traveling without military escort became easy prey. "Where are the defense forces?" terrified merchants demanded. The defense forces were trying to organize, but their battle management systems had been human-designed. Their tactical networks ran on human software. Their coordination protocols assumed human command structure. Without humans to run the systems, the various alien militaries could barely talk to each other, let alone fight effectively. A silicate commander tried to coordinate a response to the pirates. She sent orders to a Centauran destroyer group. The message took 6 hours to route through the broken communications network. By the time it arrived, the pirates had already escaped. The emergency council session was chaos. Delegates screamed at each other. Some demanded they swallow their pride and recall the humans immediately. Others insisted this was just a temporary adjustment period. Things would stabilize. Ambassador Yael tried to maintain order. "We are going through withdrawal pains," he announced. "This is natural when removing a dependency. We will adapt. We will develop our own solutions." "How many must die while we adapt?" a Torvan delegate shouted. "As many as necessary. We cannot run back to the humans at the first sign of difficulty. That would prove we are inferior to them." "We are inferior to them, at least in the areas where they excelled. That is not shame, that is fact." The chamber descended into arguments. No solutions emerged. No plans were made. The council accomplished nothing. On Earth, Helen Graves watched the chaos unfold. Her staff compiled reports: medical system failures on 70 worlds, navigation hazards in 40 sectors, economic collapse in 12 major markets, border wars breaking out, pirate activity up 400%. "Ma'am, we are receiving thousands of distress calls," an aide reported. "Medical emergencies, ships lost in space, refugee crises, they are begging for our help." Helen read through the reports. She saw the death tolls, the suffering, the desperation. Part of her wanted to end this immediately, send help, save lives, but she knew that would teach nothing. "File them," she ordered. "Every call, every message, save them all. When this is over, the galaxy will see exactly how many times they asked for our help and we refused." "Why?" "Because when we finally return, they need to understand something. We did not abandon them. They abandoned us first. They voted us out. We simply honored their choice. Every death, every disaster, every moment of suffering happened because they chose pride over partnership." Her aide looked troubled but said nothing more. Helen turned back to the monitors. "How long until complete systems collapse?" "At current rates, 4 to 6 months before critical infrastructure fails across the core worlds, maybe 3 months for the outer sectors." "And how long before they vote to recall us?" "Unknown. Many species are still too proud to admit they were wrong." Helen nodded slowly. "Then we wait, we watch, and we let them learn the hardest lesson of all. Independence means standing alone. And standing alone means facing the consequences of your choices without anyone to catch you when you fall." The reports kept coming, each one worse than the last. Earth's response never changed. The quarantine held firm. Humanity stayed home while the galaxy burned. Rain fell on New Harvest for the first time in 70 years. The settlers watched in horror as water poured from clouds that should not exist. Their atmospheric processors were failing. The delicate balance that made this world breathable was collapsing. The colony administrator pulled up the maintenance logs. Every entry for the past 50 years had a human signature: atmospheric chemistry, pressure regulation, temperature control, humidity management, all of it maintained by human environmental engineers who understood the complex interactions. "Contact the technicians who installed these systems," she ordered. They were human contractors. They left 3 months ago. The administrator looked out at the growing storm. On a properly terraformed world, weather was predictable, controlled. This was chaos, the kind of chaos that preceded atmospheric collapse. "How long before the air becomes unbreathed?" Her science officer checked the readings. "The oxygen percentage is already dropping. If we cannot stabilize the processors, maybe 6 weeks before we need to evacuate." New Harvest held 12 million colonists. The administrator started making calls. They would need ships, lots of ships, But when she contacted the transport guilds, she learned they were overwhelmed. 47 colony worlds faced similar crises. Not enough ships existed to evacuate them all. Some colonies would have to be sacrificed. The agriculture crisis hit the core worlds hardest. People in the outer sectors were used to hardship, but citizens of advanced worlds had not experienced real hunger in generations. Now, they learned what it meant when the food supply failed. The hybrid crops that fed billions were dying. Human agronomists had engineered them to grow in alien soils. They balanced nutrients. They resisted local diseases. They produced massive yields in environments where native plants could not survive. But they were also delicate. Without human oversight, the careful balance broke down. On Plenty, a world that produced food for 6 neighboring systems, the wheat fields turned brown and brittle. Farmers stood at the edges of their property, watching decades of work wither away. What happened? One farmer asked a local agricultural scientist. The soil chemistry is wrong. The crops need specific nutrient ratios. Without the human-designed monitoring systems, we cannot maintain the balance. Can we fix it? The scientist looked at the dead fields. Not in time for this season. Maybe not for many seasons. We need to relearn everything the humans taught us. That knowledge did not transfer when they left. Rationing began on 60 core worlds. Food riots erupted on a dozen more. Governments fell as hungry populations blamed their leaders for the human expulsion. The power grid failure started small. One sector went dark, then another, then 10 more. Within a week, 200 star systems lost their main power supply. The fusion containment systems that provided unlimited clean energy simply shut down. Engineers examined the systems frantically. The fusion reactors themselves were alien technology, but the containment fields, the regulation systems, the safety protocols were all human innovations. Without those systems, the reactors could not operate safely. They had to be shut down. Billions of beings found themselves without electricity. No heat, no light, no life support in sealed habitats, no power for medical facilities, no energy for transportation. Civilization ground to a halt. Emergency power systems kicked in on some worlds, but those were only designed to last for days, not months. Fuel reserves depleted rapidly. The darkness spread. On Station Gamma 7, a deep space habitat housing 3 million workers and their families, the main reactor shut down on day 4 of the crisis. Emergency batteries provided 6 hours of life support. After that, nothing. The station administrator sent out a desperate call. This is Gamma 7. Main power is offline. We have 6 hours of air remaining. We need immediate evacuation or we need human engineers to restart our reactor. Please respond. The nearest ships were 2 days away. Human engineers could restart the reactor in minutes, but they were not coming. Earth's quarantine held firm. Rescue ships arrived 53 hours later. They found Gamma 7 silent and dark. All 3 million inhabitants dead from asphyxiation. The news spread across the galaxy. Images of the dead station. Children frozen at their school desks. Families holding each other in the darkness. The council tried to suppress the footage, but it leaked anyway. Public opinion began to turn. How many more would die? How many more stations would go dark? How many more worlds would starve? But the council leadership remained defiant. Ambassador Yair gave a public address trying to calm the panic. We face challenges, yes, but we are adapting. We are learning. We do not need humanity to survive. We never did. They made us dependent, and now we are breaking that dependency. Yes, there is pain, but pain is the price of true independence. Privately, Yair was not so confident. His own aides brought him reports that terrified him. The Tesseran plague had spread to 40 worlds, 200 million dead and counting. The Kryn Dominion was invading the outer reaches, sensing weakness. Border wars were erupting everywhere human peacekeepers had once maintained order. And the humans were doing nothing, not because they could not help, because they chose not to. Yael made a secret decision. He would go to Earth himself. He would negotiate humanity's return, quietly, without the Council's knowledge. They could announce it as if the humans had volunteered to come back. Pride would be preserved. His ship traveled to Earth's solar system. Human defense satellites locked onto him immediately. Weapons powered up. A cold voice came over the communication channel. "You are entering quarantine space. State your business." "I am Ambassador Yael of the Canthari Coalition. I request an audience with Director Helen Graves." A pause, then, "Granted, you may dock at Station Luna. No other vessels, no armed guards, you come alone." Yael agreed. What choice did he have? He met Helen in a simple conference room. No ceremony, no formality, just two people across a table. "I come to discuss your return," Yael began. "No." The single word hit him like a slap. "You have not heard my offer." "I do not need to. The Council voted to expel us. Unless the full Council votes publicly to invite us back, we stay here." "But people are dying." "Yes," Helen's expression was stone. "They are, and every one of those deaths is the Council's responsibility. You wanted us gone, we are gone. We made a mistake." "Then admit it, publicly, have the Council vote again. Acknowledge your error, apologize, then we will discuss terms." Yael felt his frustration rising. "This is about pride for you. You want us to grovel." "No," Helen leaned forward. "This is about teaching a lesson that will last 1,000 years. You expelled us because you thought you did not need us, because you were arrogant, because you valued your pride over our partnership. Now you are learning what that choice costs. When you are ready to admit your mistake to the entire galaxy, not just in a secret meeting, then we will talk." "The Council will never agree to that." "Then more will die," Helen stood. "You have made your choice, live with it." Yael returned to Council space empty-handed. He reported that Earth refused to negotiate. He did not mention that he had gone there. The Council would see that as weakness. Instead, the Council voted to double down. They announced new initiatives to develop indigenous technology, to train new engineers, to rebuild without human help. They assured the public that solutions were coming. But the death toll kept rising. The disasters kept multiplying. And somewhere on Earth, Helen Graves watched and waited for the galaxy to break completely before she would allow it to heal. The quantum entanglement array that served as the galaxy's communication backbone died on a Tuesday. Trillions of beings suddenly found themselves cut off from the wider universe. No instant messages, no video calls, no real-time data transfer. They were thrown back to speed-of-light communications where messages took years to cross between star systems. The technician who discovered the failure stared at the dead array in disbelief. "This cannot be happening. The redundant systems should have activated." Her supervisor checked the backup systems. All offline. All requiring human maintenance protocols that nobody else understood. The quantum entanglement nodes were stable for decades once established, but they needed periodic realignment. Without human physicists who understood the mathematics, the nodes had slowly drifted out of sync until the entire network collapsed. How long to rebuild? Rebuild, we do not even fully understand how it works. Maybe 50 years, maybe never. Galactic coordination became impossible overnight. Governments could not contact their distant colonies. Trade networks fell apart. Military forces lost contact with their fleets. Every species suddenly found themselves isolated in ways they had not experienced in centuries. The Tesseran plague took advantage of the chaos. It mutated, spread. Without fast communication, quarantines failed. Ships carried the disease to new worlds before anyone knew they were infected. The death toll reached 150 million. Medical researchers across the galaxy tried desperately to develop a cure, but they could not share data effectively. Without the human-designed research networks, scientists worked in isolation. They repeated each other's failed experiments. They wasted time rediscovering things their colleagues on other worlds had already learned. Dr. Valen worked 20-hour days in his Centauran laboratory. He had watched so many patients die. He had failed so many families. The guilt ate at him. He had voted to expel humanity. He had thought Centauran medicine was good enough. He had been wrong. Late one night, he recorded a message knowing it would take months to reach anyone. To my colleagues across the galaxy, I am sorry. I was arrogant. I thought we did not need human help. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. Every patient I lose, I see their faces in my dreams. This is my fault. This is our fault. We must admit our mistake before more die. He sent the message into the void and hoped someone would eventually receive it. The Kryn Dominion had conquered 80 star systems by month 9. Their military moved through Council space like a blade through water. The various alien defense forces tried to organize a response, but without human tactical coordination, they were ineffective. Ships arrived at battle zones hours apart instead of in coordinated strikes. Species used incompatible communication systems and could not talk to each other during combat. Battle plans fell apart because nobody understood the human doctrine of combined arms warfare. The Kryn Emperor watched the easy victories and laughed. They are like children playing at war. Without their human commanders, they are nothing. Refugee fleets fled before the Kryn advance. 50 billion displaced beings packed into overcrowded transports. They fled to the core worlds seeking safety. But the core worlds were already struggling, already starving, already dying in darkness. The refugee camps became death traps. Disease spread through the crowded conditions. Food ran out. Medical supplies depleted. Children died in their mother's arms. The old and sick were abandoned because there were not enough resources to save everyone. Images leaked across what remained of the galactic networks. A young Torven girl, her eyes hollow with hunger, sitting beside her dead parents. A silicate elder weeping over a mass grave. A Centauran doctor breaking down because she had to choose which patients lived and which died due to medicine shortages. The public rage grew. This was not the independence they had been promised. This was hell. On the council floor, the moderate species finally found their voice. "Enough," the Torven delegate shouted. "How many more must die for our pride? We made a mistake. We must admit it." "Never," Yael responded. "Admitting failure would prove humanity was superior to us." They were superior in the things they excelled at. That is not shame. That is reality. A mathematician is not ashamed to admit an engineer knows engineering better. We each have strengths. Humans had theirs. We threw those strengths away because we were jealous. The debate raged for days. Finally, a vote was called. Should the council formally request humanity's return? The chamber fell silent as the votes were tallied. 423 yes, 424 no. The measure failed by a single vote. That night, 30 species announced they were withdrawing from the council. Led by the Silicate communes and the Torven clans, they formed the Restoration Coalition. Their first act was to send a public message to Earth. "Humanity, we were wrong. We should never have voted to expel you. We do not speak for the council, only for ourselves, but we ask humbly if you would help us, not as servants, not as dependents, but as partners. We offer you whatever you need. We offer you our friendship. Please help us." The message reached Earth within hours, thanks to the old quantum relay the Silicates had maintained. Helen Graves read it carefully. Her staff waited for her decision. "Do we help them?" her chief of staff asked. Helen considered. These species had shown wisdom. They had admitted their mistake publicly. They had broken from the council rather than cling to false pride. They deserved a response. "Yes, send medical teams. engineers, food shipments, but only to Restoration Coalition space. The Council wanted independence. They can keep it. Human ships arrived in silicate space a week later. The change was immediate and dramatic. Plague containment protocols established within days. Power grids restored. Communication networks rebuilt. Food production stabilized. Within a month, Restoration Coalition worlds were recovering, while Council worlds continued to collapse. The contrast was impossible to ignore. On dying Council worlds, citizens watched news feeds showing healthy, functioning restoration systems. They saw human doctors saving lives, human engineers restoring power, human peacekeepers stopping the Kryn advance in Coalition space. The protests started small. A few dozen beings on one world demanding their government request human aid, then hundreds, then thousands, then millions. On 1,000 worlds, populations took to the streets demanding their leaders swallow their pride. "Let us join the coalition," they chanted. "Bring back the humans, admit we were wrong." Governments fell. New leaders emerged promising to seek humanity's return. The Council leadership watched their authority crumble. Ambassador Yael stood alone in his office watching his career dissolve. His people had turned against him. Other species blamed him for leading the expulsion vote. He had become the symbol of the galaxy's greatest mistake. A group of young aliens appeared on every functioning news network. Students, children, too young to have voted in the original expulsion. They delivered a simple message directly to Earth. "Humans, we are sorry. Our leaders made a terrible choice. We are paying for their pride with our lives. Please come back. We need you. Not because you are superior, but because you are our friends, and we miss you." The message went viral across the broken networks. Billions watched these young faces pleading for help. The pressure on the Council became unbearable. The vote was called again. This time, the chamber was different. New delegates sat in many seats. Leaders who had voted for expulsion had been removed by their own people. The moderate voices now dominated. The tally climbed steadily. 791 votes in favor of requesting humanity's return, 56 against. The measure passed. Ambassador Yael watched his life's work crumble. He had led the charge to remove humanity. Now he had to lead the vote to beg for their return. The irony was not lost on him. Helen Graves appeared as a hologram before the Council 3 days after their vote. She did not sit. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, a military posture, formal, distant. The chamber was packed. Every species wanted to hear humanity's response. "We have received your request," Helen began. Her voice was calm but cold. "After 10 months of isolation, the Galactic Council has voted to invite humanity back. We accept this invitation, but with conditions." Murmurs ran through the chamber. Conditions. Some delegates looked offended, others looked simply relieved. "First condition," Helen continued. "Every species that voted for our expulsion must issue a public acknowledgement of their mistake, not a quiet apology. A broadcast to your entire population explaining why you were wrong. Your citizens deserve to know why they suffered." Ambassador Yael felt his stomach drop. Public humiliation. But what choice did they have? Second condition. Galactic education will now include mandatory courses on human history and the consequences of prejudice. Future generations must understand what happened here, why it happened, and why it must never happen again. Several delegates nodded. That seemed fair. Third condition. Any species may leave the galactic community if they wish. That is their right. But attacking those who choose to work with humanity will be considered an act of war against Earth. We will not allow our partners to be punished for association with us. The military delegates shifted uncomfortably. Earth was making it clear they would not be pushed around again. Fourth condition. We will rebuild your infrastructure, restore your medical systems, repair your economies, and help you recover. but on our timeline. We will prioritize assistance based on how species voted and how they behaved during this crisis. Those who showed wisdom and humility will be helped first. Those who clung to pride until the end will wait. The chamber erupted. Some species protested loudly, others simply accepted it. What else could they do? Helen waited for silence. These conditions are not negotiable. Accept them all or we return to Earth and you face your problems alone. You have 1 hour to vote. The hologram disappeared. The debate was brief. The vote was overwhelming. 834 species voted to accept humanity's conditions. Only 13 voted against. The crisis had broken the galaxy's pride. The human ships began arriving within days. Medical vessels first. They headed straight for the Tesserine system where the plague still raged. Human epidemiologists, doctors, and researchers descended on the dying world. Dr. Valen met them at the landing pad. He had not slept properly in weeks. His hands shook with exhaustion. When the first human doctor stepped off the transport, Valen did something he never thought he would do. He fell to his knees. "Forgive me," he said. "I voted to send you away. I thought we did not need you. So many died because of my arrogance." The human doctor helped him to his feet. Her name was Rachel Kim. She looked tired, but her eyes were kind. "You did your best with what you had," she said gently. "Now let us finish this together." Within 48 hours, human containment protocols stopped the plague's spread. Within a week, human-developed treatments brought the death rate down dramatically. Within a month, the plague was over. The final death toll was 230 million beings, a number that would haunt the galaxy forever. Rachel worked alongside Valen in the final days of treatment. She taught him everything, showed him the systems he had not understood, explained the protocols that had seemed mysterious. "Why are you teaching me this?" Valen asked. "You could keep this knowledge to yourselves, make us dependent again." Rachel looked at him seriously. "That is exactly what we will not do. You are right that you need to understand these systems. Not so you can function without us, but so you can work with us as equals. Partnership requires understanding on both sides." The same scene played out across the galaxy. Human engineers arrived at the dark star systems. They restored power grids while training alien technicians, not just showing them which buttons to push, but explaining the underlying principles. The mathematics, the physics, the design philosophy. On New Harvest, the atmospheric processors came back online. The rain stopped. The sky cleared. The settlers could breathe easily again. Human environmental engineers spent weeks teaching the colony's scientists how to maintain the systems properly. "We should have learned this before," one scientist admitted. "We just assumed you would always be here to fix things." "You assumed wrong," a human engineer replied. "But now you know better." The navigation beacon network took months to restore. Human physicists worked with alien technicians at every node. They rewrote the control systems to be more intuitive. They created detailed training programs. They made sure that humans would not be the only ones who understood quantum entanglement networks. The food crisis took longer to address. Agricultural systems were complex. Soil chemistry varied by world, but human agronomists arrived with seeds, knowledge, and patience. They taught alien farmers how to maintain the delicate balances, how to monitor their crops, how to adapt when things went wrong. On Plenty, the dead wheat fields were replanted with guidance from human experts. The farmer who had watched his life's work die now watched it return to life. "Will it grow?" he asked nervously. The human agronomist checked the soil readings. "Yes, and when it does, you will know how to keep it growing, even after we leave." That phrase appeared everywhere, "even after we leave." Humans were not trying to make themselves indispensable again. They were trying to make themselves unnecessary, teaching, not just doing. The wars proved harder to stop. The Kryn Dominion did not surrender easily. Human military forces arrived at the front lines and pushed back hard. The Kryn had grown arrogant, thinking the galaxy was defenseless. They learned otherwise when human battle fleets arrived. The Battle of Corvan Reach lasted 3 days. Human ships, using tactics no other species had mastered, surrounded and neutralized the Kryn fleet without destroying it. They forced surrender through superior positioning and strategy. The Kryn Emperor requested a meeting with the human admiral. He expected threats, demands. Instead, the admiral offered a treaty. Your people are warriors, we respect that. But there is a difference between being a warrior and being a murderer. Join us. Fight alongside us when real threats emerge, or return home and leave others in peace. Choose. The emperor had expected death. Instead, he received an offer of dignity. He chose peace. The economic recovery took time, but human financial experts worked with alien economists to rebuild the credit systems. They made them simpler, more transparent, harder to exploit. They shared knowledge instead of hoarding it. 1 year after their return, Helen Graves stood at a memorial dedication ceremony. A massive black wall listed 847 million names, every being who died during the 10-month crisis. The inscription was simple. They died because we forgot that strength comes from unity, not division. Never again. Representatives from every species attended. Many wept openly, some in grief, some in shame. Ambassador Yael approached Helen during the ceremony. He looked older now, worn. I want you to know, he said quietly, I publicly admitted my mistake to my entire world. I told them I was wrong. I told them I led us into disaster because of my pride. Helen looked at him. I know, I watched your broadcast. My career is over, my reputation destroyed. Yes. Was it worth it, all this death, all this suffering to teach us a lesson? Helen turned to face the wall of names. Ask me in 1,000 years, if the galaxy remembers this lesson, if species work together instead of tearing each other apart, if prejudice and pride do not lead to more disasters, then yes, it was worth it. These people did not die for nothing. They died to teach future generations what not to do. She walked away, leaving Yael alone with his thoughts and his guilt. 5 years after the crisis, the Unity Academy opened its doors on a neutral world between 3 star systems. The building was beautiful, designed by architects from 6 different species working together. Every wall, every corridor reflected compromise and cooperation. The first class of students filed into the main lecture hall, young beings from dozens of species. Human children sat beside Centauran youth. Silicate younglings studied next to Torvan cubs. Kryn warriors in training shared desks with former enemies. Professor Renata Washington stood at the front of the lecture hall. Behind her, a holographic display showed images from 5 years ago. Dying worlds, dark stations, mass graves. Welcome to Crisis History, she began. This is a required course for every student at this academy. Some of you are too young to remember what happened. Some of you lost family members. All of you need to understand why it happened. She clicked through images. The council vote, human ships departing, systems failing, death tolls rising. Pride, she said simply. That is what nearly destroyed galactic civilization. Not war, not disease, not disaster, pride. The council believed they did not need humanity. We believed you were better off without us. Both sides were arrogant. Both sides were wrong. A young Canthari student raised his hand. Professor, my father was Ambassador Yael. He led the vote to expel humans. I want to apologize for what he did. Renata shook her head. You are not responsible for your father's mistakes, but you are responsible for learning from them. That is why you are here. She continued the lecture explaining the cascade of failures, the medical collapse, the infrastructure breakdown, the wars, the starvation. She did not sugarcoat anything. These students needed to understand the full cost. 847 million beings died, she concluded, because we forgot something simple. We are stronger together than apart. Every species has strengths. Every species has weaknesses. Partnership means covering each other's gaps, not competing to prove superiority. After class, a human girl approached a Kryn boy nervously. My uncle fought in the Corvan Reach battle, against your people. The Kryn boy stiffened. My uncle died in that battle. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then the human girl extended her hand. We are not our uncles. We can be different. The Kryn boy took her hand. Agreed. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. The crisis had fundamentally changed how species viewed each other. Old prejudices remained, but they were no longer acceptable in public. Laws were passed against discrimination. Mixed species crews became common. Interspecies friendships flourished. On Tesseran, Dr. Valen directed a research hospital staffed by human and Centauran doctors working side by side. He had not voted to expel humans this time. In fact, he had become one of humanity's strongest advocates. A medical student asked him once, "Why do you work so hard with the humans? Are you trying to make up for your vote?" Valen considered the question. Partly yes, but also because I learned something during the crisis. Medicine is not about individual brilliance. It is about collective knowledge. Humans have insights we lack. We have insights they lack. Together, we save more lives than either species could alone. The student nodded and returned to work alongside her human instructor. In the engineering sectors, the restoration of infrastructure had led to new innovations. Human engineers and silicate technicians developed hybrid systems that combined human creativity with silicate precision. The results were more efficient than anything either species had created alone. On the void lanes, mixed species crews maintained the navigation networks. A human physicist worked with a Centauran mathematician to improve the quantum entanglement nodes. Their collaboration produced systems that were more stable and easier to maintain. We should have done this from the beginning, the Centauran said, instead of humans maintaining everything while we just used it. We should have, the human agreed, but we were both comfortable with the old arrangement. Sometimes comfort prevents growth. The Kryn Dominion had transformed the most dramatically. Their emperor, humbled by defeat, had reformed their entire society. Kryn warriors now trained at the Unity Academy. They learned human combat philosophy alongside traditional Kryn methods. General Kavak, who had led the invasion 5 years ago, now commanded a joint human-Kryn peacekeeping force. He stood on the bridge of a mixed cruise ship and marveled at how much had changed. "Sir," his human tactical officer reported, "we have received a distress call from the Outer Rim." "What is the situation?" "Unknown enemy, large force, moving through dark space." Kavak looked at the display showing the threat assessment. His old instinct was to attack immediately. His new training told him to gather information first. "Contact the Council. Alert all nearby species. We face this together." The message went out across the restored communication networks. Within hours, every major species was aware of the threat. They did not argue. They did not hesitate. They had learned their lesson. Helen Graves, now in her 70s but still sharp, received the alert on Earth. She called an emergency meeting of human military command and representatives from allied species. "We have a situation," she began, displaying the sensor data. "Unknown force, possibly hostile, definitely powerful." A silicate general studied the readings. "This is beyond anything we faced before." "Exactly why we need everyone," a Kryn admiral added. "Human tactics, Centauran intelligence, silicate engineering, Torvan resilience, all of it." Helen smiled slightly. 5 years ago this conversation would have been impossible. Now it was natural. "We mobilize the combined fleet. Every species contributes based on their strengths. We coordinate fully. We fight as one. Within days, the largest military force in galactic history assembled. Human ships flew alongside former enemies. Species that had barely spoken 5 years ago now shared tactical data freely. The battle, when it came, was fierce. The unknown enemy was powerful, relentless, but the combined fleet adapted. When human weapons proved ineffective, Kryn firepower filled the gap. When shields failed, silicate engineers reinforced them mid-battle. When tactics needed adjustment, mixed species command staff figured it out together. They won, not easily but decisively. The victory belonged to no single species. It belonged to all of them. In the aftermath, soldiers from different worlds helped each other with repairs, shared medical care for the wounded, mourned losses together. They had become something new. Not humans helping aliens, not aliens learning from humans, just people working together. The memorial wall was expanded to include the names of those who died in the battle. But next to the section of names was a new inscription. They died defending a galaxy that learned to stand together. Helen Graves stood before the memorial one last time before her retirement. A young Canthari official approached her, Yiral's son. He had followed his father into diplomacy but had chosen a different path. Director Graves, I wanted to thank you for leaving, for coming back, for teaching us. Helen looked at him. I did what was necessary, the hard thing, the cruel thing, but necessary. My father died last year. His last words were about the crisis. He said he finally understood why you did it. And what did he understand? That sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone fall, so they learn to stand on their own. Helen nodded. Your father was right. We did not abandon you. We let you experience the consequences of your choice. Now you understand why that choice was wrong, and you will never make it again. She looked at the young Canthari, at the mixed species guards, at the memorial listing millions of names. Humanity walked away, she said softly. The galaxy felt doom, but from that doom came understanding. From that suffering came unity. The galaxy that exists now is stronger than the one we left. That is worth the cost. She turned and walked away. Behind her, the galaxy continued turning, changed, scarred, but united in ways it had never been before. The lesson had been learned in blood and tears, but it had been learned. And it would never be forgotten.